I knew something was wrong the moment Diane Crenshaw lifted her phone like a weapon and told me, "By tonight you'll be gone." I thought she meant she'd call the HOA, maybe the sheriff. I didn't think she would try to take an entire county away from me. And I definitely didn't think I'd end up learning I owned more land than any man alive in this state. All because one HOA Karen pushed too far. I was just replacing a couple planks on my dock that afternoon, minding my business, enjoying the kind of quiet you can only find near a lake that's older than your grandfather's stories. The sun was warm, the birds were loud, and life felt simple in a way city people forget exists. Then I heard those damn heels, sharp, fast, angry clicking across my dock like some kind of territorial bird trying to scare off a rival. I turned around and there she was, Diane Crenshaw. Blonde hair yanked into a tight bun, sunglasses bigger than her ego, and two HOA members trailing behind her like they were scared she might fire them from a job they didn't even have. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She didn't even breathe before launching into "You're Reed Garrison" like she was reading my name off a criminal file. "That's me," I said, already bracing for whatever nonsense she brought with her. Diane wasn't the type to show up for friendly neighbor chat. She was the type to measure the width of your mailbox with a ruler and tell you it violated Section 4A, Line 21 of some HOA handbook no one had ever actually seen. She smirked like she'd already won something. "You're in severe violation of county development codes." County, not HOA. That was the first red flag. I looked around at my cabin, my family's cabin. This old, solid, 70-year-old structure built with logs my grandfather cut by hand. It wasn't pretty in a modern sense, but it was strong, and it was ours. "What violations?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She popped open a thick folder like a prosecutor on TV and started listing things faster than I could process them. Architectural non-compliance, waterfront irregularities, environmental impact hazards, aesthetic degradation. That one stung. She said it like my cabin was an eyesore among her imaginary lakefront mansions. "I have all the permits," I told her, "filed with the county 3 months ago." Her laugh, Jesus. If venom had a sound, it would be that laugh. "Oh, Mr. Garrison, you don't understand how things work here. I work directly with the departments. The county trusts me to enforce development standards. No department names, no officials. Just the county. The way con artists say the feds." Then she said the line that lit the fuse, "I'm ordering you to vacate by week's end." Vacate. I stared at her, thinking maybe I misheard. This is my land. She tilted her head, fake sympathy dripping off her like perfume. "Can't I?" And she raised her phone, dialed 911, and told the operator she had a trespasser refusing to leave designated development land. Designated development land. She meant my dock. 20 minutes later, 2 officers showed up. They looked from Diane to me, to the deed in my hand, and back to Diane. And after 10 minutes of checking, rechecking, and calling dispatch, they stepped aside and said, "Ma'am, he owns this property. You can't remove him." You'd think she'd back down, but no. Diane just glared at me with this cold, calculated smile, the smile of someone who wasn't done. She walked away like she knew something I didn't, and as she left she said, "Enjoy your evening while you can." The next morning someone shoved an envelope under my door. Thick paper, official-looking seal, the whole 9 yards. Inside was a summons to some emergency hearing for county compliance enforcement. Not at the community building by the lake. Nope, downtown, in a massive auditorium, run by something called the Regional Development Advisory Council. I'd lived here my whole life. I'd never heard of that council, but I went. And I walked into a crowd of at least 300 angry people, neighbors, business owners, folks from miles away. The stage was lit. Giant screens were up, and right in the center, sitting like she was running for governor, was Diane. Behind her were 3 men in suits, each with a long, official-sounding title: Deputy Director of Regional Planning, Senior Coordinator for Economic Development, Chief Environmental Compliance Specialist. The kind of titles people invent when they need you to shut up and obey. My cabin was plastered on the screens in bright, angry red. There were graphs, charts, maps. Diane stepped up to the mic and announced, One man's refusal to comply threatens $50 million in economic development. And the crowd roared, not at her, at me. She blamed me for declining tourism, for job loss, for property values dropping. According to her, my tiny cabin, was the anchor dragging an entire county into poverty. I tried to speak, but every time I opened my mouth, someone shouted, "Make him comply," or "He's selfish," or "We need progress." It felt like standing in front of a firing squad armed with microphones and pitchforks. Then came the moment that cracked Diane's perfect facade. An old man, Harold Peterson, stood up. Former county clerk, 40 years in government work. The kind of man who knows real authority from fake authority, the way a mechanic knows a real engine from a cardboard cutout. He asked one question. "Diane, under which ordinance does the Regional Development Advisory Council have authority to enforce property compliance in Morrison County?" Everything went silent. For half a second, Diane froze, and I swear I saw real fear flicker in her eyes. She recovered fast, brushed him off, told him governance has evolved since your retirement. But the damage was done. The audience didn't notice it, but I did. Still, at the end of the hearing, the crowd voted nearly 80% in favor of taking my cabin by force. I walked out feeling humiliated, isolated, and honestly, ready to give up. For a few minutes, I even wondered if I was the one being unreasonable. If maybe losing my cabin was worth ending the fight. Back home, I dropped onto my porch and stared at the box of old documents my grandfather had left behind. Maps, deeds, surveys. I'd never taken time to go through them. But that night, something pushed me to open it. And there it was, a letter from 1952. One line that made my stomach drop. Verification of original county land grant documentation file designation, CG 11847, Morrison County active. Active. I called the State Land Records Office. They transferred me to a historian who told me she needed to check deeper. 5 minutes later, she came back, her voice shaking. "Mr. Garrison, your land grant. It's not a cabin deed. It's the founding land grant for the entire county. It was never superseded. According to our records, your family still holds perpetual ownership." I didn't understand. I asked her again, and she repeated it. "You own the county, the entire county." I drove to the state capitol the next morning. They laid the documents out for me, beautiful parchment, handwritten ink, official seals that looked older than time. The grant said perpetual ownership and administrative authority over all lands within the designated county boundaries. My great-great-great-grandfather had been granted the land in 1847 in exchange for establishing local infrastructure during the territorial years. And the kicker, he never gave up administrative rights. They just forgot to enforce them. Which meant every HOA rule, every county law Diane had used, every ordinance, every enforcement threat. None of it applied to me. They were all trespassing on my land. I showed the Attorney General the documents, and his exact words were, "Mr. Garrison, this county has been operating on faulty legal assumptions for over a century, and this woman is committing several federal crimes on your property." A multi-county investigation opened overnight, and the Attorney General said something I'll never forget. "We're going to expose her, but we need you with us." The next day was Diane's victory celebration. News vans everywhere, red carpets, politicians, CEOs, investors. Banners reading Morrison County Renaissance. A whole PR circus built on lies. I put on my best suit, grabbed my leather briefcase with the original 1847 documents, and waited. She took the stage in a white power suit, camera-ready smile, reporters clinging to her every word. She raised a ceremonial sledgehammer wrapped in county-colored ribbons, pointed at my cabin taped off behind her, and declared she would remove the final obstacle to our future. I stepped out onto my dock, grabbed the event microphone feed with a remote the Attorney General had given me, and said one word: "Stop." Her head snapped around. Every camera turned toward me. I walked across the grass toward the crowd, calm, steady, briefcase in hand. "Before anyone destroys anything today," I said, "there's something you all need to know about the land you're standing on." Diane screamed, "Security, remove him!" But security didn't move. They were state troopers now, real ones. I held up the original land grant, letting the cameras zoom in on the seals. "This document," I said, "is the 1847 Territorial Land Grant establishing Morrison County. It grants my family perpetual ownership of all county land, Every inch of it, including this field, including that cabin, including the property where each of you built your homes. The audience gasped. Some stepped back like the ground had turned radioactive. Diane laughed hysterically. "That's fake. He's desperate. Arrest him." That's when the sirens hit. Not local police, state vehicles, black SUVs. The Attorney General himself stepped out, flanked by investigators. He took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the entities claiming authority over this county, including the Regional Development Advisory Council, do not legally exist. They were created by Ms. Crenshaw and her associates as part of a multi-county fraud scheme." The crowd erupted. Some shouted at Diane, others shouted at me. Apologies, disbelief, fear, anger. The three officials on the stage: the deputy director, senior coordinator, environmental specialist. Two of them ran, literally ran through the parking lot like their suits were on fire. Troopers tackled one. The other slipped on wet grass and face-planted in front of Channel 9 News. The Attorney General continued, "Ms. Crenshaw has impersonated government officials, manipulated property owners, and attempted illegal land seizures on territory she had no authority over." Diane shrieked like a kettle boiling over. "You can't do this. I worked with commissioners, with developers. You don't understand the scale of what we built." And that was it. She confessed. On camera. Agents stepped forward. "Diane Crenshaw, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, impersonating government officials, and criminal trespass." The crowd watched silent, stunned, as she was handcuffed, still yelling, still insisting she ran the county. She didn't run anything anymore. I stood there watching her hauled off, feeling something I hadn't felt since the whole nightmare began. Not triumph, not joy, just relief. The Attorney General turned to the crowd and said Mr. Garrison's ownership rights supersede all fraudulent actions taken by Ms. Crenshaw, and with his cooperation we will restore every property wrongfully affected. People looked at me differently then. Not like an enemy, not like an obstacle, just a man who stood his ground long enough for the truth to finally catch up. And that's where my story ends. Not with a celebration, not with a rebuilt cabin or a ribbon cutting, but right there in that exact moment when the woman who tried to destroy my life was finally exposed for the fraud she truly was. Sometimes the loudest bully in the room only wins because no one ever checks the paperwork.